Imagine this. You've spent 10 years mastering a video game character that everyone else abandoned. A character so notoriously difficult to play that the entire gaming community considers them absolute trash. No magic abilities in a world where magic is everything. Just one single teleportation skill that barely works. You've turned this limitation into an art form, learning every exploit, every tiny advantage, every microscopic detail that could keep this character alive for just one more second. Now imagine waking up and discovering you've become that character, not in the game, in reality, and the world around you is dying. This is the nightmare that becomes the story of Magic Academy's Genius Blinker, a manhwa that takes the oversaturated isekai genre and injects it with a dose of genuine terror, strategic, brilliance, and the kind of high-stakes survival that makes your palms sweat. Today, we're diving deep into a world where 90% of everything has already been destroyed, where the protagonist has one chance to reach the true ending, and where the only magic skill available is considered the most useless ability in the entire game. Welcome to Etherworld. Welcome to Stella Academy. Welcome to a story where being the weakest doesn't mean you're helpless. It just means you have to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than everyone who underestimates you. Let's start at the very beginning, because understanding how catastrophically wrong things went is essential to appreciating just how impossible the protagonist's task really is. The world that already ended Etherworld Online was a massively multiplayer game that captured the imagination of thousands of players worldwide. A fantasy realm where magic flowed through every living thing, where powerful mages could reshape reality with their spells, where ancient academies trained the next generation of magical prodigies. It was a world of wonder, danger, and endless possibility. The kind of game world that players could lose themselves in for hours, days, years. But here's the thing about game worlds. They have endings. Multiple endings, actually. Good endings, where the heroes triumph and peace reigns. Bad endings where darkness consumes everything. And then there are the catastrophic endings, the ones that happen when players ignore the main storyline for so long that the world's destruction becomes inevitable. That's exactly what happened to Etherworld. 10 years after the game's release, the player base had grown bored. They'd seen all the content, defeated all the bosses, collected all the legendary artifacts. The community had descended into what can only be described as collective brain rot. Players started doing increasingly bizarre things just to entertain themselves. Speed runs wearing nothing but underwear. Challenge runs with deliberately terrible equipment. Player versus player battles on a special integrated server where the strongest players could test their mettle against each other. The main storyline? The carefully crafted narrative about stopping an ancient evil from consuming the world? Nobody cared anymore. It was old content. Boring. Everyone had seen it 100 times. Except the game's systems kept running. The Dark Mages, a cult-like organization that had infiltrated every corner of Etherworld, continued executing their sinister plan. The Persona Gates, dimensional rifts that spawned monsters and corruption, kept opening across the continent, and deep in the sealed dimensions where ancient horrors slumbered, something monstrous was stirring. The 13th moon of the Black Night. The demonic Black Dragon, Darkest Night. The final boss that was never supposed to be released unless every other safeguard in the world failed, and they all failed, because nobody was playing the story anymore. One player, however, was different. Our protagonist, whose real name we discover is Baek Yuseol in both the game and now in this horrifying reality, had spent a decade doing something that would seem absolutely insane to anyone else. He had been playing as the character Baek Yuseol, a character universally acknowledged as having the highest difficulty rating and the worst performance statistics in the entire game. Why? Because in a fantasy world where literally everyone could use magic, where 5-year-olds were casting fireballs and creating ice sculptures with a thought, Baek Yuseol couldn't use magic at all. Well, that's not entirely accurate. He had one spell, one single magical ability in his entire arsenal. Blink. For those unfamiliar with typical game mechanics, let me explain why this is so devastatingly terrible. Blink is a basic teleportation spell that almost every mage in Etherworld can learn. It's usually treated as a utility skill, something you use for convenience rather than combat. The spell teleports the user randomly between 3 to 10 meters, in an unpredictable direction. It has a long cooldown, meaning you can't use it repeatedly. It consumes an enormous amount of mana relative to its effect. And here's the real kicker. After using it, you're stunned for 2 full seconds, completely vulnerable to any enemy nearby. Most players learned Blink, used it maybe twice, realized how terrible it was, and never touched it again. The randomness alone made it nearly useless in any tactical situation. You couldn't aim where you were going. You might teleport directly into danger instead of away from it. The 2-second stun was practically a death sentence in any serious combat scenario. So why did our protagonist spend 10 years mastering this absolute garbage character with this absolutely useless ability? The honest answer is that he thought it would be funny. He shared a name with the character. They looked similar. It became a personal challenge. And over 10 years, he became the absolute, undisputed, legendary master of playing Baek Yuseol. He learned to exploit the Blink ability in ways the developers never intended. He discovered that while you couldn't control the exact destination, you could influence the probability by positioning yourself carefully. He found that the 2-second stun could actually be weaponized if you timed it right with environmental hazards. He mastered every single combat encounter by pure skill, positioning, and game knowledge, compensating for his lack of magical damage with perfect execution. He became known in the community as that one weird player who could actually win with Baek Yuseol, a curiosity, a novelty, someone whose dedication bordered on obsession. And then one day, he decided to check the game's forum after a particularly long PvP session. What he found there made his blood run cold. The posts were panicked, confused, angry. Players were reporting that the entire game world had suddenly transformed. The beautiful landscapes they knew were now covered in ash and corruption. A massive black dragon had appeared out of nowhere, destroying everything in its path. Persona gates were erupting everywhere, unleashing hordes of monsters. 90% of the continent had been consumed by darkness. Only one location remained intact. Stella Academy, the prestigious magical school that served as the game's hub area, was still standing. But even it was marked in red on the map, indicating it was under siege, barely holding on against the encroaching destruction. Our protagonist stared at his screen in disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen. The game had multiple endings, sure, but this level of devastation was unprecedented. This was the worst possible outcome. The catastrophic failure state that happened when literally everything went wrong. And then, he made a decision that would change everything. He decided to actually fight the final boss, the demonic black dragon, darkest night of the 13th moon. A boss encounter that was supposed to require a full raid party of max-level characters with optimal gear. He went alone, as Baek Yuseol, the character who couldn't use real magic. What followed was one of the most grueling boss fights imaginable. He'd collected every legendary artifact he could find over the years. He'd maxed out every stat that could be maxed. He'd learned every pattern, every attack telegraph, every tiny opening in the boss's defense. The battle lasted for what felt like an eternity, but he won. Against all odds, through sheer skill and determination and 10 years of accumulated game knowledge, he defeated the final boss. The demonic black dragon fell. The 13th moon's dark influence began to fade. And then something happened that had never happened before in the entire history of Etherworld Online. A message appeared. Not a normal game message. Something else. Something that felt far too real, too present, too aware. The message read, "Because the wrong ending has been reached, 90% of Etherworld has been destroyed. Please reach the true ending." Before he could process what that meant, before he could even screenshot the bizarre message to share with the community, his vision went white. His sense of self scattered, and when awareness returned, everything had changed. He was no longer sitting at his computer in his room on Earth. He was standing in a stone corridor, his body feeling wrong, unfamiliar. He looked down at his hands and they weren't his hands. They were smaller, younger, belonging to someone else. He caught his reflection in a polished suit of armor standing guard in the hallway. The face staring back at him was Baek Yuseol. Not a character model on a screen. A real, living, breathing person. With messy brown hair and amber gold eyes that faded to a subtle brown at the top. A face he'd stared at for 10 years, seeing it emote, seeing it react, seeing it die countless times in increasingly creative ways as he learned to master this impossible character. Except now it was his face. This was his body. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a system interface activated, displaying information just like the game used to. The message appeared again, clearer this time, undeniable. You can use the skill blink, survive in Stella Academy among genius mages, reach the true ending. The full weight of his situation crashed down on him all at once. He had been transmigrated into the game world, into Ether World, as his character, with all of his character's limitations and weaknesses. In a world that had already been 90% destroyed, where the timeline had progressed past the point of saving most of civilization, where only Stella Academy remained as a bastion against the darkness. And he had one job: find the true ending. The ending that nobody had ever discovered because the game had been out for 10 years, and thousands of players had tried every possible combination of choices, and nobody had ever found it. The pressure was unimaginable, the odds were impossible, and to make matters worse, Baek Yuseol wasn't even a named character in the original storyline. He existed in the game as an unnamed extra, one of 1,140 first-year students attending Stella Academy. A background character, someone who would appear in crowd scenes and then vanish from the narrative entirely. This wasn't a power fantasy where the protagonist gets incredible abilities and steamrolls through every challenge. This was a survival horror story wearing the skin of a magical academy tale. And our protagonist's first advantage, the one thing that might keep him alive in this nightmare scenario, was the same advantage he'd had in the game. He knew what was coming. He knew the story. He knew which characters were important, which events were critical, which threats lurked in the shadows waiting to strike. He'd played through the storyline dozens of times, even if he'd mostly been focused on other aspects of the game. He knew about the dark mages. He knew about the 12 new moons, powerful entities connected to the world's destruction. He knew about the Persona Gates and the ancient evils sealed away in hidden dimensions. Knowledge is power. And in a world where he was the weakest link, where his only ability was the universally mocked blink spell, where genius mages surrounded him on all sides with the kind of magical firepower he could never hope to match, knowledge might be the only thing keeping him alive. But first, he had to understand his situation more completely. He had to figure out where he was in the timeline, what events had already occurred, and what he needed to do to survive his first day at Stella Academy. Welcome to Stella Academy. Stella Academy isn't just any magical institution. It's the most prestigious mage academy in the entire world, the kind of place where noble families send their gifted children to be trained by legendary professors, where cutting-edge magical research happens, where the future leaders of magical society are forged. Getting accepted to Stella Academy is considered one of the highest honors a young mage can achieve. Graduating from Stella Academy basically guarantees a successful career in whatever field you choose. The academy itself is enormous, more like a small city than a school. Multiple buildings spread across a vast campus, each dedicated to different magical disciplines. The main academy building towers over everything else, an architectural masterpiece of magical construction with soaring spires and windows that seem to capture and refract light in impossible ways. The dormitories are luxurious, designed to house students in comfort while they pursue their studies. Training grounds dot the landscape, specialized areas where students can practice their magic without accidentally destroying anything important. And everywhere you look, there are students demonstrating magical abilities that would seem like miracles in any normal world. A casual gesture creates flames dancing in the palm. A whispered word summons water from the air. Complex magical circles appear and disappear as students practice their spellcasting. The very air thrums with magical energy, so thick you can almost taste it. For someone like Baek Yuseol, who possesses mana leakage syndrome, a condition so rare it supposedly only occurs once per century, this environment is simultaneously awe-inspiring and deeply humiliating. Mana leakage syndrome means he cannot store mana in his body the way normal mages do. Mana flows through him and immediately leaks out, making it impossible to build up the reserves needed to cast spells. It's like trying to fill a bucket that has holes in the bottom. No matter how much mana is available in the environment, he can't keep it inside himself long enough to use it. This is why Baek Yuseol can only use Blink. The spell is so basic, so simple, that it doesn't require stored mana reserves. It uses mana directly from the environment in a single burst. It's the magical equivalent of grabbing a handful of water from a river and throwing it, instead of needing to fill a bucket first. Every other student at Stella Academy can do things he cannot. They can cast fireballs, ice spears, lightning bolts. They can create barriers, heal injuries, enhance their physical abilities. They can summon familiars, manipulate the elements, even bend space and time with enough skill and training. The curriculum assumes every student has basic magical competency, because how could you possibly attend the world's premier magical academy without being able to use magic? And yet, here he is. Baek Yuseol, the character with the worst performance rating in the game, the student who will struggle with every class, fail most practical exams, and be looked down upon by peers and professors alike. The extra who exists in the background while the real story happens to other, more important people. Except our protagonist has something none of these genius mages possess. He has the mind of a player who spent 10 years learning to survive in this world. He knows secrets that haven't been discovered yet. He knows which professors are secretly dark mages in disguise. He knows which dungeons contain valuable artifacts. He knows which events will spiral into catastrophes if left unchecked. And most importantly, he knows who the main characters are. The true protagonists of Etherworld's story. The students who will become the legendary heroes fighting to save whatever remains of civilization from total annihilation. But here's where things get complicated. The original storyline, the one he played through in the game, led to the wrong ending. The catastrophic ending where 90% of the world was destroyed. That means following the story exactly as he remembers it will result in the same disaster. He needs to change things. But he also can't change things too much, or he might make everything worse. He needs to find the true ending, the hidden perfect, route that nobody ever discovered. It's a razor's edge to walk. One wrong move could doom everyone. As Baek Yuseol begins to orient himself to his new reality, he quickly realizes that he has additional advantages he didn't expect. The game interface is still with him, but it's evolved into something more. He discovers that he can see information about other people, displayed like character stat screens. Names, abilities, personality traits, even their feelings toward him represented as an affinity number. This is an incredible advantage. Imagine being able to see someone's hidden talents, understand their capabilities, even gauge whether they like or hate you just by looking at them. It's the kind of cheat ability that could turn a weak character into a master manipulator, someone who always knows exactly what everyone around them is capable of. But it comes with its own dangers. Some people's abilities are terrifying. Some affinity numbers are deeply negative, meaning those people actively want him dead. And the more he uses his knowledge to change events, the more he risks creating entirely new problems that weren't in the original story at all. His first few days at the academy are a delicate balancing act. He needs to lay low, avoid drawing attention to himself, and most importantly, avoid the main characters. In the original story, extras who got too close to the protagonists tended to die in dramatic and permanent ways. The main characters attract danger, like magnets attract metal. Filings, monsters, villains, catastrophic events, all of it swirls around them constantly. But staying away from the main characters proves impossible when you know what's coming. When you know that a certain classroom is about to be attacked by monsters, can you really sit back and let innocent students die? When you know that a professor is secretly a dark mage planning something terrible, can you ignore it? When you know that a hidden artifact could save dozens of lives if someone retrieved it first, before the villain gets their hands on it, can you justify doing nothing? The answer, for our protagonist, is no. He can't stand by and watch disasters unfold when he has the knowledge to prevent them. But every time he intervenes, he changes the story in unpredictable ways. And in a world where the wrong ending already destroyed 90% of civilization, unpredictable changes are terrifying. Let's talk about some of the key figures in this world, because understanding them is essential to understanding the story's complexity. The main characters and major players. First, we need to talk about Eizel, Morph, the original protagonist of the story that Etherworld Online was based on. The game itself was adapted from a romance fantasy novel called Don't Love the Unfortunate Princess. and Eizel was its main character. She's the kind of tragic heroine that romance novels love to torture. Her family, the Grand Duchy of Morph, fell from grace when her father was accused of corruption into dark magic. Whether this accusation was true remains a mystery, but the consequences for Eizel were devastating. She lost everything: her home, her status, her security. She was branded as the daughter of a traitor, a social pariah. Despite being a magical genius, despite having the potential to become one of the most powerful mages of her generation, she's systematically bullied. At Stella Academy, other students, particularly those from noble families, treat her with contempt. She works multiple part-time jobs just to afford basic necessities. She's barely scraping by, living in constant poverty while surrounded by the wealth and privilege of her peers. In the original novel, Eizel's story was supposed to be about finding love despite all her hardships, about the male lead seeing past her circumstances to the person beneath. It was meant to be a redemption arc, a story of rising from the ashes, but the game twisted this narrative. In the game's version, things went horribly wrong. Eizel's quest for revenge against those who destroyed her family consumed her. The story ended in tragedy, with the world itself being destroyed. This catastrophic ending was so poorly received that readers absolutely hated it. The backlash was intense. How could you take a sympathetic protagonist through so much suffering and then have everything end in apocalyptic failure? It felt cruel, pointless, like the author was punishing readers for caring about the characters. But now, in this reality where the game world has become real, Eizel's fate takes on new significance. She's not just a fictional character anymore. She's a real person experiencing real suffering. And our protagonist knows that in the original timeline, her despair and desire for revenge played a role in the world's destruction. When Baek Yuseol first encounters Eizel at the Academy, he's struck by several things. First, she's devastatingly beautiful, with periwinkle blue eyes and long azure hair that cascades down her back. But there's a sadness to her, a weariness that shouldn't exist in someone so young. She rarely smiles. She keeps to herself, and when he checks her stats with his ability, he sees potential that takes his breath away. Class 3 Mage already, as a first-year student. That's extraordinary. But he also sees her affinity toward him. Neutral. She doesn't know him, has no opinion about him. Which means he has an opportunity to change her story, to maybe prevent whatever dark path she walked in the original timeline. But how do you save someone without revealing that you know their future? How do you help without seeming suspicious? The answer, he decides, is to be genuinely useful without seeming like he has ulterior motives. Small interventions, a kind word here. Practical help there. Nothing too obvious, nothing that would make her question how he knows so much about her situation. Their first real interaction happens during a practical magic class. The students are divided into groups and sent into training areas to hunt magical creatures, earning points based on their performance. It's the kind of scenario where Eizel usually struggles because other students refuse to team with her, leaving her to tackle challenges alone. But Baek Yuseol, knowing what's coming, engineers a situation where they end up as partners. What follows is a revelation for both of them. Baek Yuseol might not be able to cast offensive magic, but he can use blink in ways that seem impossible. He teleports around the battlefield with precision that appears superhuman, positioning himself perfectly, creating openings for Eizel to land devastating magical attacks. And Eizel, freed from having to worry about multiple angles of attack, can focus entirely on offensive magic, demonstrating skills that leave other students speechless. They synchronize beautifully. She casts a crystal flower ice spell that she shouldn't be able to perform yet, a technique she was only supposed to master much later in the story. The sheer power and precision of her magic, combined with his tactical support, earns them first place with 199 points, an astonishing score that makes everyone take notice. For Eizel, this is the first time in a long while that someone has treated her as an equal, as a valuable partner rather than a pariah to be avoided. Her affinity toward Baek Yuseol begins to increase. She starts to trust him, to see him as possibly a friend in a world that has offered her precious little friendship. For our protagonist, this is both encouraging and terrifying. Encouraging because he's successfully changed a key character's trajectory in a positive way. Terrifying because now he's on her radar, which means he's becoming more involved in the main story, which means more danger is inevitably coming his way. But Eizel isn't the only important character in this complex web of relationships and power dynamics. There's also Ma Yuseol, one of the male leads from the original story. Ma Yuseol is everything Baek Yuseol is not. Tall, handsome, incredibly powerful, from a prestigious magical family. He's the kind of protagonist that other students admire and want to emulate. His magic is flashy and devastating, the kind that makes crowds gasp in awe. In the original story, Ma Yuseol was supposed to develop a romantic relationship with Eizel, becoming one of her protectors and eventually one of her love interests. But the story never quite developed the way it should have, and that relationship became complicated, messy, part of the tragedy that led to the world's destruction. Now, with Baek Yuseol interfering in events, Ma Yuseol's role becomes uncertain. Does he still meet Eizel the same way? Do they still develop feelings for each other? And more importantly, if their relationship was meant to be part of the true ending path, is disrupting it a terrible mistake? These are the kinds of questions that keep our protagonist awake at night, worrying about butterfly effects and cascading consequences. Then there's Scarlett, and she's perhaps the most dangerous person in this entire world. Scarlett is known as the Witch Queen, a legendary Class 9 witch who has been active since the days of the 12 disciples of the progenitor Mage. In a world where most powerful mages are Class 6 or maybe Class 7 at the absolute peak of their abilities, Class 9 is essentially God tier. She's so powerful that if she interfered in mortal affairs without restraint, she could overturn history itself. The problem is that Scarlett has been sealed in an isolated dimension for centuries. She can only interact with the world through weakened avatars, temporary projections of herself that have a fraction of her true power. Even these avatars are terrifyingly strong, capable of feats that would take multiple archmages working together to replicate. In the original novel, Scarlett was only mentioned briefly, a mysterious figure living in the mountains or clouds, someone beyond mortal concerns. But in the game's expanded lore, she became a much more active character, and her involvement in certain events was crucial to the storyline. When Baek Yuseol eventually encounters Scarlett, it's one of the most dangerous moments of his life. She's described as a beautiful young woman with white hair, but there's something ancient and terrible in her eyes. She has a playful personality and enjoys teasing people. But beneath that facade is a being of immense power who has lived for over 1,000 years. Scarlett takes an interest in Baek Yuseol for reasons that aren't immediately clear. Maybe it's because he's such an anomaly, a student with almost no magical power surviving in an academy full of prodigies. Maybe it's because his actions start breaking rules of the world that were supposed to be absolute. Or maybe it's because he reminds her of someone from her past, a former love who died centuries ago. Regardless of her reasons, having Scarlett's attention is both a blessing and a curse. She becomes something like a teacher to him, appearing at random moments to give cryptic advice or to test him in ways that could easily kill him if he fails. But she also protects him, in her own strange way, from threats that would otherwise obliterate him. Their relationship is complex, built on mutual interest rather than genuine trust. She's fascinated by this anomaly that defies her expectations. He's terrified of her but also recognizes that her knowledge and power could be crucial to finding the true ending. Another key figure is Hongbi Yeon, a student from an incredibly prestigious family who becomes entangled in the story's events. Hongbi Yeon is a fire mage of exceptional talent, someone who carries the weight of her family's expectations on her shoulders. She's proud, arrogant in the way that only someone who has been told they're special their entire life can be, but she's also deeply aware of the political machinations happening around her. In the original story, Hongbi Yeon had her own arc, her own struggles and growth. She was supposed to overcome her pride and learn to work with others, becoming a valuable ally to the main protagonists. But again, our protagonist's interference changes things in unexpected ways. The web of relationships at Stella Academy is intricate and constantly shifting. Alliances form and break, rivalries emerge, friendships develop in unexpected places, and all of it happens against the backdrop of a world that has already suffered catastrophic damage, where the threat of total annihilation still looms over everything. The hidden threats. While the Academy politics and interpersonal drama are certainly important, they pale in comparison to the real threats lurking in this world. Remember, this isn't a light-hearted school story. This is a world where 90% of civilization has already been destroyed. The Persona Gates are constantly spawning monsters. Dark mages are working in the shadows to complete their terrible plans. And the 12 new moons, entities of immense power connected to the world's destruction, are moving pieces into place for their final gambit. Let's talk about the Dark Mages first, because understanding them is crucial to understanding the danger everyone faces. The Dark Mages aren't just evil wizards twirling their metaphorical mustaches. They're a cult-like organization that has infiltrated every level of magical society over centuries. They believe that the current world order is fundamentally broken and needs to be torn down and rebuilt. Their methods for achieving this involve dark magic, human sacrifice, summoning eldritch horrors, and generally causing as much death and destruction as possible. What makes them truly terrifying is how deeply embedded they are. Some of the most respected professors at Stella Academy are secretly dark mages. Some government officials are dark mages. Some military leaders are dark mages. They've been playing a long game, positioning themselves in places of power and influence, waiting for the right moment to strike. In the original game, there were multiple storylines involving dark mage infiltration and sabotage. Our protagonist remembers many of these events because they were essential to the main plot. He knows which professors can't be trusted. He knows which students are being groomed to join the dark mages. He knows where secret meetings are held and what their plans involve. This knowledge makes him a target. If the dark mages realize that someone knows their secrets, that person becomes a liability that must be eliminated. And Baek Yuseol, for all his cleverness and game knowledge, is still fundamentally very weak in direct combat. A single dark mage assassin could kill him easily if they caught him off guard. So he has to be careful. Incredibly careful. He can't reveal what he knows directly. He has to manipulate events subtly, creating situations where the dark mages expose themselves or where their plans fail for seemingly natural reasons. It's a delicate game of informational warfare, where one slip could mean death. Then there are the Persona Gates, dimensional rifts that spawn monsters and corruption. These gates appear randomly throughout the world, tearing holes in reality, and allowing creatures from other dimensions to pour through. In-game, Persona Gates were basically dungeon instances, places where players would go to fight monsters and collect loot. But in this reality, they're apocalyptic events. When a Persona Gate opens near a populated area, it can mean the death of everyone nearby if not dealt with quickly. The monsters that emerge are varied and deadly. Some are mindless beasts that attack anything moving. Others are intelligent, organized, capable of tactics and strategy. And the worst ones, the highest level threats, can level entire cities if not stopped by powerful mages working together. Stella Academy has protocols for dealing with Persona Gates that appear near campus. Teams of students and professors respond quickly, containing the threat before it can spread. But it's dangerous work. Students die in these encounters. Even skilled mages can be overwhelmed if they're unlucky or make a single mistake. Baek Yuseol knows which Persona Gates are particularly dangerous from his game knowledge. He knows which ones spawn nightmare-level creatures. He knows which ones are actually deliberate attacks orchestrated by dark mages rather than random occurrences. And he knows which ones need to be dealt with personally, because leaving them to play out as they did in the original story would result in deaths that might be preventable. But the most terrifying threat isn't the dark mages or the Persona Gates. It's the 12 new moons, entities so powerful that they exist beyond normal comprehension. Each of the 12 new moons is connected to a specific moon in this world's sky, and they represent different aspects of magical power and corruption. They're not quite gods, but they're close. Ancient beings that have existed for eons, sealed away by powerful magic, waiting for the seals to weaken enough for them to break free. The 13th moon of the Black Knight, the one associated with the demonic black dragon that our protagonist defeated in the game, was the most powerful of these entities. Its release in the original timeline caused the destruction of 90% of the world. But the other 12 new moons are also incredibly dangerous, and in the current timeline, they're still active, still working toward their goal of complete world domination. Our protagonist knows about the 12 new moons from the game's lore. He knows their names, their abilities, their weaknesses. He knows which artifacts are connected to them, which rituals can strengthen or weaken them, which characters in the story have connections to these entities. This knowledge is invaluable but also terrifying, because it means he understands just how outmatched humanity really is. The true ending, whatever it is, must involve somehow dealing with the 12 new moons in a way that doesn't result in the world's destruction. But how? In the original timeline, the heroes failed. Even defeating the 13th moon came too late, after 90% of everything had already been destroyed. The true ending must involve preventing the catastrophe before it reaches that point, finding some hidden solution that nobody discovered in 10 years of players exploring the game. And the pressure of that knowledge weighs on Baek Yuseol every single day. He's not just trying to survive, he's trying to save an entire world with minimal magical power, surrounded by people far stronger than he is, knowing that one wrong move could doom everyone. The power of weakness. Here's where Magic Academy's Genius Blinker does something really interesting that sets it apart from typical overpowered protagonist stories. Baek Yuseol doesn't become strong in the traditional sense. He's not suddenly able to cast powerful spells. He doesn't unlock hidden reserves of mana. He doesn't get a cheat ability that makes him invincible. What he does is become terrifyingly efficient with the one thing he can do. Remember, he spent 10 years in the game mastering Blink, an ability that everyone else considered useless. He learned to compensate for its randomness by understanding probability and positioning. He learned to weaponize the 2-second stun by timing it with environmental hazards. He learned to think 3 steps ahead, always planning his next move, before making his current one. Now, in this reality, those skills translate into something that looks like magic to everyone watching. He blinks around the battlefield with precision that seems impossible. He appears behind enemies at the perfect moment. He dodges attacks that should have hit him. He creates openings for allies to strike. He disrupts enemy formations. He scouts ahead, identifies threats, and relays information faster than anyone else could. To the other students at Stella Academy, it looks like he's some kind of tactical genius with superhuman reflexes. They don't understand that he's just really, really good at using one basic spell. They think he must have some hidden power, some secret technique, and he's careful never to correct that assumption, because the moment people realize he's actually just weak, they'll stop taking him seriously, and that could get him killed. This creates a fascinating dynamic where Baek Yuseol's reputation grows, despite his actual weakness. Students start to respect him. Some fear him. Others are curious about his seemingly impossible skills. And all of it is built on the foundation of pure, dedicated practice with a single ability that most people would dismiss as worthless. The story doesn't just tell us he's clever with Blink, it shows us repeatedly how he uses it in creative ways. During a training exercise where students are hunting monsters, he uses Blink to appear in multiple locations rapidly, creating the illusion that there are several of him, confusing the monsters and making them easier to defeat. When trapped in a room with enemies, he blinks repeatedly in a pattern that causes them to attack each other rather than him. When falling from a great height, he blinks in rapid succession, reducing his fall speed just enough to survive the landing. Each use of Blink is strategic, planned, taking advantage of the environment and the situation. And each time, it reinforces the central theme of the story. Power isn't just about raw magical strength. Intelligence, adaptability, and dedication can overcome seemingly insurmountable limitations. But there's another layer to this as well. Baek Yuseol's weakness forces him to rely on others in ways that powerful characters don't have to. He can't solo difficult challenges. He needs allies, people who trust him and will work with him. This means he has to build genuine relationships, earn people's respect, and prove his value beyond just magical firepower. His partnership with Eizel is the perfect example. She has overwhelming magical power, but struggles tactically and emotionally. He has almost no magical power, but excels at tactics and understanding people. Together, they're far more effective than either could be alone. Their synergy becomes legendary at the Academy, with other students trying to figure out how they work so well together. Similar partnerships develop with other characters. Each time, Baek Yuseol brings something unique to the table that isn't about raw power, information that prevents disasters, tactical insight that turns impossible battles into winnable ones, social manipulation that diffuses dangerous situations before they escalate, resource gathering that ensures his allies have what they need to succeed. He becomes a force multiplier, someone whose presence makes everyone around him more effective. And in a world facing apocalyptic threats, that kind of value is priceless. The training montage. That isn't one of the things I really appreciate about this story is how it handles Baek Yuseol's growth. There's no sudden power-up, no magical breakthrough where he becomes exponentially stronger overnight. His progression is methodical, incremental, realistic within the world's rules. He trains constantly, pushing his body to its limits. While other students are resting or socializing, he's practicing blink sequences, training his reflexes, studying monster behavior patterns, memorizing map layouts. He treats his limitation like a puzzle to be solved rather than a handicap to be overcome. He also becomes something of a craftsman. Since he can't rely on powerful magic, he needs equipment that compensates. He learns alchemy, creating potions and tools that give him tactical advantages. He studies enchantment, learning which magical items synergize with his playstyle. He networks with other students who have complementary skills, building a web of relationships he can leverage when needed, and crucially, he studies. The Academy's library becomes his second home. He reads everything he can about the world's history, magical theory, ancient rituals, sealed artifacts, legendary weapons. Some of this information he already knows from the game, but experiencing it in detailed text form reveals nuances he'd missed, and some of it is entirely new. Knowledge that wasn't in the game because it was too obscure or had been cut during development. This dedication to preparation pays off repeatedly. When a dangerous situation arises, he's often already prepared, with the exact tool or information needed to handle it. It looks like incredible luck or foresight to observers, but it's actually just thorough preparation meeting opportunity. There's a particular sequence where the Academy faces a crisis involving a persona gate that spawns undead creatures. Most students panic because undead are resistant to many forms of magic and overwhelming in numbers. But Baek Yuseol remembered from the game that undead have a specific weakness to a certain type of alchemical compound. He'd already prepared dozens of bottles of this compound just in case, storing them in his inventory. When the crisis hits, he distributes these bottles to other students, turning a potential massacre into a manageable fight. The students think he's a genius for knowing about this obscure weakness and having the foresight to prepare. In reality, he's just been doing his homework and taking advantage of game knowledge. These moments accumulate. Each time he demonstrates value, his reputation grows. Each time he helps someone, their affinity toward him increases. And each time he successfully changes an event for the better, he gets a little bit closer to understanding what the true ending might require. But the story never lets us forget that he's fundamentally weak. There are situations where all the preparation and cleverness in the world can't overcome the raw power gap. When he faces opponents who are simply too strong, too fast, too skilled, he has to run. When disasters occur that require massive magical firepower to stop, he can only watch from the sidelines while the powerful students and professors handle it. This keeps the tension high. We're never allowed to feel like he's safe, like he's overcome his weakness. He's always one bad encounter, away from death, and that makes every victory feel earned, every narrow escape feel thrilling. The social labyrinth Stella Academy isn't just dangerous because of monsters and dark mages. It's dangerous because it's a pressure cooker of teenage egos, noble family, politics, and social hierarchies that can be as deadly as any physical threat. Students from powerful families look down on commoners. Those with exceptional magical talent form exclusive cliques. Bullying is rampant, particularly against students like Eizel who have fallen from grace. Baek Yuseol has to navigate this social maze carefully. In the original story, background characters who made social mistakes ended up ostracized, which often led to them being in the wrong place at the wrong time when disasters struck, resulting in their deaths. Social suicide was often just a precursor to actual suicide or murder, but our protagonist has advantages here too. His game knowledge includes information about students' families, their connections, their secrets. He knows which students are future heroes and which are future villains. He knows which social groups to avoid and which to cautiously approach. And his unique position as someone who isn't obviously powerful but also can't be easily dismissed gives him flexibility that other students lack. He can interact with multiple social groups because none of them see him as a threat. The powerful students tolerate him because he's useful and respectful. The weaker students appreciate him because he doesn't look down on them. The outcasts like Eizel trust him because he treats them fairly. He becomes a social connector, someone who can bring different groups together when necessary. This social flexibility proves crucial during several key events. When the Academy faces a crisis that requires coordination between different student factions who normally hate each other, Baek Yuseol is often the bridge that makes cooperation possible. His reputation as someone trustworthy, competent, and politically neutral makes him valuable as a mediator and organizer. But it also makes him a target for those who prefer division. Students from noble families who enjoy the current hierarchical system see his egalitarian approach as threatening. Dark Mage infiltrators recognize that someone building networks and connections across social boundaries could be dangerous to their plans. Rival students who covet his growing reputation try to undermine him through rumors and sabotage. The social battles are often more subtle than the physical ones, but no less dangerous. A rumor at the wrong time could destroy his credibility. Being seen with the wrong person could tank his reputation with important groups. Saying the wrong thing to the wrong person could make enemies who will remember and take revenge later. Baek Yuseol handles this by being very careful about what he says and to whom. He's polite to everyone but deeply trusts almost no one. He helps people strategically, building goodwill without creating obligation. He deflects attention away from himself, whenever possible, preferring to work behind the scenes rather than seeking glory. It's exhausting, constantly playing social chess, but it's necessary for survival in an environment as politically charged as Stella Academy. And it's another example of how the story doesn't rely on power fantasy tropes. Success requires social intelligence, emotional awareness, and careful relationship management, not just being stronger than everyone else. The Echoes of Earth one aspect of the story that adds emotional depth is Baek Yuseol's relationship with his former life on Earth. He didn't ask to be transmigrated into this world. He had a life before this. People he cared about. Plans and dreams that are now impossible to fulfill. And sometimes, in quiet moments, the weight of everything he's lost crashes down on him. The story doesn't dwell on this constantly, which would become melodramatic, but it surfaces at key moments, reminding us that despite all his knowledge and cleverness, he's just a person who has been thrown into an impossible situation. He misses simple things, the convenience of modern technology, being able to eat his favorite foods, not having to constantly worry about being killed by monsters or assassins. There are scenes where he sees something in this world that reminds him of Earth, and for a moment, the homesickness is overwhelming, but he can't afford to wallow in it. There's too much at stake. The entire world depends on him finding the true ending. So he pushes those feelings down, boxes them up, and focuses on what needs to be done. This internal struggle adds layers to his character. He's not just a clever strategist playing a game. He's someone dealing with profound loss and displacement, trying to find meaning and purpose in a world that isn't his own. And sometimes, the question creeps in. Even if he saves this world, even if he finds the true ending, will he ever be able to return to Earth? Or is this his life now forever? The story doesn't provide easy answers, but it doesn't need to. The uncertainty is part of what makes the emotional stakes feel real. He's not just fighting for abstract concepts like justice or peace. He's fighting because he's here, because people around him will die if he doesn't act, because maybe, just maybe, saving this world is the key to finding a way home. The mystery of the true ending. Throughout the story, the biggest question looming over everything is, what is the true ending? What hidden path did nobody discover in 10 years of players exploring every corner of the game? What sequence of choices and events leads to salvation instead of catastrophe? Baek Yuseol has theories, but he can't be certain. Maybe the true ending involves preventing the 12 new moons from ever awakening in the first place, which would require completely changing the timeline. Maybe it involves gathering all the legendary artifacts and using them in some specific combination. Maybe it involves redeeming characters who became villains in the original story, changing their fates so they become allies instead. Or maybe it's something completely different. Something that requires knowledge or abilities that nobody could have predicted. Something that only becomes possible through the specific changes he's making to the story as he interferes with events. This uncertainty drives much of the plot's tension. Every decision he makes could be crucial or could be irrelevant. Every person he helps could be a key to the true ending, or could be a distraction from what really matters. And he won't know if he's on the right path until it's too late to change course. The story drops hints and clues along the way. Cryptic prophecies that might be meaningful. Ancient texts that suggest hidden mechanics to how the world works. Characters who know secrets, but speak in frustrating riddles. Each piece of information could be crucial, and our protagonist has to try to fit them together into a coherent picture, while still dealing with immediate crises. There's also the meta question of why he was chosen for this task. The message said he defeated the final boss and reached the wrong ending, so he was pulled into the world to reach the true ending. But why him specifically? Were other players also transmigrated and he just hasn't met them yet? Is there something special about him beyond his dedication to playing Baek Yuseol? Or was it simply that he was the only one who actually bothered to fight the final boss when 90% of the world was already destroyed? These questions add a layer of cosmic mystery to the story. There are larger forces at work, powers, beyond even the 12 new moons, entities that can pull people between dimensions and set them tasks. What are their goals? What happens if he fails? Would someone else be pulled in to try again? Or would the world simply be allowed to end? The story doesn't rush to answer these questions. It lets them percolate, building mystery and intrigue alongside the immediate survival drama. And honestly, that's part of what makes it compelling. We're discovering the truth alongside the protagonist, piecing together clues, forming theories, wondering if we're seeing the full picture or just fragments of something much larger. Combat. Dancing on the edge. When combat happens in this story, it's intense and creative. Baek Yuseol's fighting style is unlike anything else at the Academy. While other students are throwing fireballs and lightning bolts, trading magical blows like warriors in a fantasy epic, he's teleporting around like a hyperactive ghost, appearing and disappearing so rapidly that enemies can't track his movements. His combat strategy relies on several principles. First, never be where the enemy expects. Blink randomly but with purpose, creating patterns that seem unpredictable but actually have strategic logic. Second, create openings for allies. His role isn't to deal damage, it's to disrupt enemies, so that others can land devastating attacks. Third, exploit every environmental advantage. Blink onto high ground, behind cover, near hazards that can be weaponized. One particularly memorable fight involves a powerful monster that's immune to most forms of magic. Other students are panicking because their spells barely scratch it, but Baek Yuseol notices that the training ground they're fighting in has several structural pillars that are already damaged from previous battles. He starts blinking around these pillars, getting the monster to chase him, making it charge in specific directions. Each time the monster charges, it slams into a pillar, weakening the structure. He times this perfectly, and on the final charge, the pillar collapses, bringing down part of the ceiling directly onto the monster. The weight and impact accomplish what magic couldn't, crushing the creature. To observers, it looks like incredible tactical awareness and timing. In reality, he remembered this exact scenario from the game and knew exactly how to exploit the environment. When he fights alongside Eizel, their combined efficiency is breathtaking. He blinks around the battlefield, identifying optimal positions and creating openings. She follows up with precision magical strikes, her ice spells hitting with perfect timing. They don't need to communicate verbally. They develop an instinctive understanding of each other's combat style. It's the kind of synergy that usually takes years to develop, but they achieve it quickly because he already knows how to read combat situations and she's talented enough to adapt instantly. But the story doesn't forget that he's fundamentally fragile. One solid hit and he's done. The 2-second stun after each blink is a window where he's completely vulnerable. If an enemy is fast enough or smart enough to predict where he'll appear, they can kill him before he recovers. This keeps every fight tense, because we're always aware that a single mistake means death. There's a particular fight where he faces off against a dark mage assassin who has studied his patterns. This assassin has figured out the probability, distribution of his blink destinations and can predict roughly where he'll appear. For the first time, his signature ability becomes more of a liability than an advantage. The assassin is waiting every time he teleports, blade ready. Baek Yuseol has to completely change his approach mid-fight. He starts using blink defensively, creating distance rather than attacking. He uses the 2-second stun deliberately, appearing to be vulnerable but actually using that time to observe the assassin's counter patterns. And when he finally spots an opening, he blinks directly into danger, appearing right in front of the assassin when the assassin expects him to teleport away. The gambit works. The assassin hesitates for a fraction of a second, confused by the unexpected move. And that fraction of a second is enough for Eizel, who has been waiting for the perfect moment to land a devastating ice spear that ends the fight. It's not a victory through strength. It's a victory through adaptation, creativity, and trusting his partner to capitalize on the opening he creates. These combat sequences showcase what makes the story engaging. The protagonist isn't overpowered. He's clever, adaptable, and willing to take calculated risks. Every fight is a puzzle to be solved rather than a foregone conclusion. And the solutions often involve teamwork, environmental awareness, and psychological warfare rather than just having bigger numbers than the enemy. The weight of foreknowledge, one of the most psychologically interesting aspects of the story, is how it explores the burden of knowing the future. Baek Yuseol knows what's supposed to happen. He knows which students will die in training accidents. He knows which professors will reveal themselves as traitors. He knows when disasters are supposed to strike. But knowledge without power is torture. There are events he can't prevent because he lacks the strength or resources to intervene. Students, he knows are going to die but can't save without exposing himself and potentially making everything worse. Tragedies that play out exactly as he remembers them. And all he can do is watch, helpless, knowing what's coming but unable to stop it. The guilt of these moments weighs on him. Should he have done more? Could he have found a different way? Was he too cautious, too concerned with preserving his cover when lives were at stake? These questions haunt him, especially late at night when he's alone with his thoughts. There's a particularly tragic sequence where a student he knew from the game, someone who was supposed to be a minor character with no real importance, dies in a training exercise gone wrong. In the game, this death was just a background event, barely mentioned. But here, it's a real person. Someone with hopes and dreams and people who loved them. And Baek Yuseol knew it was coming but couldn't figure out how to prevent it without revealing knowledge he shouldn't have. He attends the funeral, sees the grieving family. And in that moment, the full weight of his situation crashes down. He's not playing a game anymore. These are real people. Their deaths matter. And every time he fails to save someone, that blood is on his hands because he had the knowledge that could have prevented it. This guilt becomes a driving force. It pushes him to take more risks, to intervene more actively, even when it might be dangerous. He starts viewing his own safety as secondary to preventing tragedies. If he can save someone by putting himself at risk, he'll do it, because the alternative is living with more guilt, more deaths that he could have prevented. But this also makes him reckless at times. His allies notice that he's taking unnecessary chances, throwing himself into danger that he should be avoiding. Eizel in particular confronts him about it, demanding to know why he's so willing to sacrifice himself. He can't tell her the truth, about being from another world, about knowing the future. So he deflects, makes excuses, promises to be more careful. But the fundamental tension remains. How much risk is acceptable to prevent disaster? At what point does trying to save everyone become suicidal? And if he dies, who else has the knowledge to reach the true ending? Would his death doom the entire world by removing the one person who might be able to save it? These are heavy questions for a story that could have been a lighthearted academy adventure. But they add moral complexity and emotional depth that makes the narrative more than just a survival story. It becomes a meditation on responsibility, guilt, and the cost of trying to change fate. Allies and enemies as the story progresses. Baek Yuseol builds a network of allies, people who trust him and will fight alongside him when danger threatens. But he's also making enemies, both obvious and hidden. who see him as a threat to their plans. Among his allies, Eizel is the most important. Their partnership evolves beyond just combat synergy into genuine friendship. She comes to trust him in ways she hasn't trusted anyone since her family's fall from grace. He becomes someone she can confide in, someone who sees her as a person rather than as the daughter of a traitor or as a tool to be used. But their relationship is complicated by all the things he can't tell her. He knows details about her past that she's never shared. He knows what her father was really doing before he was accused of corruption. He knows which enemies are specifically targeting her and why. And he has to act on this knowledge while pretending he's figuring things out in real time. There's a moment where she catches him in a contradiction, where he references something he shouldn't know. She confronts him directly, demanding answers, and he has to make a split-second decision. Does he tell her the truth about being from another world, risking her thinking he's insane? Or does he lie, potentially damaging their trust? He chooses a middle path, telling her a partial truth. He explains that he has prophetic dreams, visions of possible futures. It's not entirely false. His game knowledge is essentially foreknowledge. This explanation satisfies her curiosity while maintaining his cover. But it also adds another layer of deception to their relationship, and he knows that if she ever discovers the full truth, the betrayal might be unforgivable. Among his other allies are students from various social groups. Some are powerful, like Hong Bi-yeon, who initially views him with suspicion, but gradually comes to respect his tactical abilities. Others are weaker students, who appreciate that he doesn't look down on them and treats them as equals. He builds relationships carefully, never making promises he can't keep, always being clear about what he can and cannot do. But his enemies are numerous and varied. The Dark Mages see him as a threat because his interference has disrupted several of their plans. They don't know why he seems to know things he shouldn't, but they recognize that he's dangerous. Assassination attempts become more frequent as the story progresses. He has to constantly watch his back, never knowing when a seemingly innocent situation might turn deadly. There are also rival students who hate him out of jealousy or political calculation. His growing reputation, his closeness to powerful students like Eizel and Hong Bi-yeon, his seemingly impossible skills despite lacking magical power, all of this makes him a target for those who feel threatened by his rise. Some try to undermine him through social sabotage. Others are more direct, challenging him to duels or creating dangerous situations where they hope he'll fail and be humiliated or injured. The most dangerous enemies, though, are the ones he doesn't see coming. Changes he's made to the timeline have created ripple effects, causing new threats to emerge that weren't in the original story. Villains who should have been defeated early on survive and grow stronger. Allies who should have joined the heroes instead become enemies because of how events unfolded differently. Each change creates uncertainty, new variables that he can't predict and has to adapt to on the fly. This constant threat environment means he can never fully relax. Even at the academy, supposedly a safe haven, danger lurks around every corner. He sleeps lightly, always ready to wake and fight. He checks his food for poison. He varies his routines to avoid being predictable. And he always has an escape route planned, because sometimes the smartest move is to run rather than fight. Moments of levity. Despite the high stakes and constant danger, the story does have moments of humor and levity that prevent it from becoming oppressively dark. Academy life includes social events, festivals, and ordinary teenage interactions that provide breathing room between crisis situations. There are scenes where Baek Yuseol's lack of common sense about this world's culture leads to comedy. He makes references to things from Earth that don't exist here, confusing people. He misunderstands social customs because the game never explained them in detail. He's surprised by magic being used for mundane tasks because players never really paid attention to the slice-of-life aspects of the world. His relationship with his allies also provides comedy. Eizel has a dry wit that catches him off guard sometimes. Hong Bi-yeon's princess-like attitude clashes hilariously with his practical approach to problems. And when he tries to explain his tactical plans to people who think in terms of raw magical power rather than strategy, the confusion on their faces is genuinely funny. There's a particularly amusing arc where the academy holds a cultural festival, and students from different classes compete in various events. Baek Yuseol gets roped into participating in a cooking competition despite having no culinary skills. His attempts to cook with magic, which he can barely use, result in disasters that have the audience in stitches. But he manages to turn it into a comedic performance, playing up his failures for laughs, and ends up winning an award for Most Entertaining Disaster. These lighter moments serve an important purpose. They remind us that despite everything, these are still teenagers. They're still young people learning about themselves, making friends, experiencing first loves, and figuring out who they want to be. The apocalyptic threat is real, but it doesn't consume every moment of every day. There are still spaces for joy, laughter, and normal human connection. And for Baek Yuseol, these moments are precious. They're reminders of why he's fighting so hard to save this world. It's not just an abstract goal or a mission he's been given. It's about preserving these small moments of happiness, these connections between people, this beautiful, complicated, frustrating, wonderful world that has somehow become his home. The path forward. The story continues to unfold. The mystery of the true ending deepens. Baek Yuseol has made significant changes to the timeline, prevented major disasters, saved lives that were lost in the original story, but he still doesn't know if he's on the right path or if he's just delaying the inevitable catastrophe. New threats emerge as the 12 new moons begin to stir more actively. Persona gates increase in frequency and severity. The dark mages accelerate their plans, sensing that time is running out. And in the shadows, ancient powers that predate even the 12 new moons begin to take notice of the anomaly that is Baek Yuseol. His allies grow stronger, developing abilities that exceed what they achieved in the original timeline. Eizel breaks through to Class 4 Mage, an unprecedented achievement for someone her age. Hongbi masters advanced fire magic techniques years ahead of schedule. Other students that he's helped along the way bloom into their full potential, creating a generation of heroes that might actually be strong enough to face the coming darkness. But with every success, the pressure intensifies. The higher everyone's expectations climb, the more devastating failure would be. If he's wrong about the path to the true ending, if his changes have actually made things worse instead of better, then he'll have failed not just himself, but everyone who trusted him. The weight of that responsibility would crush most people, but Baek Yuseol has something that keeps him going. He's been here before. Not literally, but emotionally. For 10 years, he played a character that everyone said was impossible to win with. He faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. He died countless times, learned from his mistakes, and came back stronger. He knows how to persevere when the odds are impossible, because that's what he's been doing his entire gaming career. And now, those same skills that made him a legendary player are being applied to saving an actual world. The pattern recognition, the ability to stay calm under pressure, the willingness to try unconventional solutions, the understanding that sometimes you need to take one step backward to take 2 steps forward. All of it translates from game to reality in ways that give him advantages beyond just knowledge of future events. He's not just trying to reach the true ending by following a guide or copying someone else's solution. He's creating his own path, adapting to changes, improvising when necessary, and trusting in his ability to figure things out even when he doesn't have all the answers. And maybe, just maybe, that's what the true ending requires. Not perfect knowledge or overwhelming power, but the willingness to keep trying, keep adapting, keep fighting even when success seems impossible. The determination to save a world that isn't even his own, simply because it's the right thing to do. Magic Academy's Genius Blinker stands out in the crowded isekai and Magic Academy genres because it refuses to take the easy path. It would have been simple to make this a power fantasy, where the protagonist quickly becomes the strongest person in the world and steamrolls through every challenge. But instead, the story commits to the limitation it establishes and explores what that limitation means for every aspect of the narrative. The protagonist's weakness is never hand-waved away or rendered irrelevant. It's a constant factor that shapes his strategies, his relationships, his role in the story. He succeeds not by overcoming his weakness, but by finding ways to be valuable despite it. And that's a fundamentally different message than most stories in this genre provide. It's also a story about knowledge versus power, showing that sometimes knowing what's coming is more valuable than being able to punch really hard. But it doesn't make knowledge a perfect solution. There are things he knows that don't help, events he can't prevent even with perfect foreknowledge, and changes he makes that create new problems he didn't anticipate. Knowledge is a tool, not a cheat code. The relationships in the story feel earned rather than convenient. Baek Yuseol has to work to gain people's trust. He has to prove his value repeatedly. And even then, relationships are complicated, messy, sometimes strained by all the things he can't say. There are no easy alliances or instant friendships based on nothing but convenience for the plot. The world feels lived in, with depth and complexity beyond just being a backdrop for cool magic fights. The politics of the Academy, the history of the Dark Mages, the nature of the 12 new moons, all of it is woven together into a tapestry that feels coherent and thought through. You get the sense that this world existed before the protagonist arrived and will continue to exist after his story ends, whatever that ending turns out to be. And perhaps most importantly, the story takes its stakes seriously. Deaths matter. Failures have consequences. The apocalyptic threat isn't just window dressing. It's a real looming presence that shapes everything. Characters can and do die when they make mistakes. Not everyone can be saved. And the burden of trying to save a dying world takes a psychological toll that the narrative doesn't shy away from exploring. All of this combines to create a story that's engaging on multiple levels. The action is exciting, with creative uses of limited abilities making fights tactical and interesting. The mystery of the true ending provides ongoing narrative drive, always dangling that ultimate question just out of reach. The character development is satisfying, showing people grow and change in response to their experiences. And the emotional core, the protagonist's determination to save a world that isn't his and people he's come to care about, grounds everything in human feeling rather than just spectacle. So where does all of this leave us? Magic Academy's genius. Blinker is a story that takes familiar genre elements, the transmigration isekai, the magical academy, the world-ending threat, and combines them in ways that feel fresh and engaging. It's a story that respects its audience enough to not hand them easy answers, that challenges its protagonist in meaningful ways, and that builds toward revelations that genuinely matter. If you're tired of overpowered protagonists who face no real challenges, this is a story where the protagonist is genuinely, fundamentally weak and has to compensate through cleverness and preparation. If you're tired of harems where relationships feel shallow and convenient, this story builds friendships and potential romances that develop organically over time. If you're tired of worlds that feel like cardboard cutouts, this world has depth and lore that rewards attention and engagement. But more than anything, it's a story about perseverance, about facing impossible odds and refusing to give up, about making the best of terrible situations and finding meaning in struggle, about becoming important not through innate superiority, but through dedication, intelligence, and genuine care for others. Baek Yuseol's journey from joke character to crucial figure in the world's salvation mirrors the journey many of us face in our own lives. We start with limitations, disadvantages, circumstances that seem to stack the deck against us. We can choose to give up, accept those limitations as permanent, and settle for less than what we could be. Or we can choose to get creative, find workarounds, exploit every tiny advantage, and refuse to let our limitations define what's possible. The story suggests that maybe being weak isn't the end. Maybe it's just the beginning of a different kind of strength. The strength that comes from having to think rather than just react. The strength that comes from building genuine relationships rather than dominating others. The strength that comes from understanding that everyone has value, everyone has something to contribute, and that sometimes the weakest person in the room can still make the difference between salvation and destruction. And isn't that a message worth hearing? In a world that constantly tells us we need to be the strongest, the fastest, the best at everything, maybe it's okay to be weak at some things. Maybe it's okay to need help. Maybe it's okay to succeed not through individual dominance, but through teamwork, strategy, and refusing to quit even when everything seems hopeless. Magic Academy's genius Blinker tells us that the character everyone dismissed as trash might actually be the hero the world needs. Not because he became something other than trash, but because he learned to excel at being exactly what he was. And in a world facing its darkest hour, sometimes that's exactly what makes the difference. So if you're looking for a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, with tactical battles and mysterious prophecies, this delivers. If you're looking for a story with emotional depth that explores themes of guilt, responsibility, and perseverance, this delivers. If you're looking for a story that takes the isekai concept and does something genuinely interesting with it, rather than just recycling the same tired tropes, this absolutely delivers. And if you're looking for a protagonist who proves that even the weakest person can change the world if they're clever enough, dedicated enough, and brave enough to keep trying even when success seems impossible, then Baek Yuseol's journey is one you won't want to miss. The true ending is still out there, waiting to be discovered. The threats continue to mount. The stakes have never been higher. And somewhere in a magical academy in a dying world, a young man with only one spell continues to fight, continues to plan, continues to refuse to give up. Because giving up isn't an option when the entire world depends on finding a path that nobody else has ever seen. That's the story of Magic Academy's Genius Blinker. A story of weakness turned strength, knowledge turned weapon, and determination that refuses to bend even when the apocalypse itself stands in the way. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into one of the most compelling manhwa in the Academy and Mage genre. If you enjoyed this exploration and want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below letting me know what you think about Magic Academy's Genius Blinker, or suggest other manhwa you'd like me to cover in future videos. Your support keeps this channel going and helps me bring you more in-depth analysis of the stories we all love. Until next time, keep reading, keep exploring, and remember that even if you feel like the weakest person in the room, you might just have exactly what the world needs to survive.